Klingons, Romulans, Xindi, and the return of Captain Okran. Oh my. This is Prodigal Trek, a spotlight on Star Trek Prodigy. Good morning, Nuknech, and peace and long life to everyone in the Alpha, Beta, Gamma, and Delta quadrants. This is your host, Josh Pritchett, bringing you another recap on our great new show, Prodigal Trek, a spotlight on Star Trek Prodigy. So, I want to welcome everybody today, and thank you all for joining us on this very chilly and windy Sunday morning, and I hope the weather is better where you're at than it is here. So, okay, with that said, let's get into our review of this week's episode. So, we start the episode with Vice Admiral Janeway aboard the Starship Nautilus as they're continuing their search for the protostar. Meanwhile, Gwen's father, who is also aboard the Nautilus, is still in rehab and has not completely recovered all of his memories and doesn't even completely know who he is. He just knows he would like to find his daughter. Then again, we don't know if he's faking it or he's on the level that he really doesn't remember who he is or what he was doing. Meanwhile, our faithful crew has decided that they will land the protostar on an ice planet somewhere out on the edge of the Delta Quadrant and an attempt to try to find a vessel that will take them back to the Federation where they can make contact with Starfleet and bring help to save their ship. So they shut down everything, including hologram Janeway, and use a phaser to bury the protostar under a sheet of snow and ice with the hope of coming back for her later. They then head out into a nearby settlement that is largely populated by the Xindi. For those of you who are fans of Star Trek Enterprise, you will probably recall them from seasons 3 and 4. In the meantime, while there, they discover a character of Star Trek from Star Trek's past, Captain Thaddeum O'Connor, played once again by the great Billy Campbell. For those of you who might recall who that is, he appeared in one episode of season 2 of The Next Generation, and despite a lot of fan favor and appeals, he unfortunately never did come back. However, we finally got him after 32 years. He has made his triumphant return. So, as the episode progresses, the Nautilus discovers has managed to track the protostar, rather, to the same ice planet. Janeway, along with an away team of her senior officers, beams down to the settlement in the hopes of finding some clues as to the whereabouts of the protostar and also to reclaim the Starfleet officer who was serving aboard the listening outpost that was inadvertently destroyed by the weapon that is contained inside the protostar. So our crew splits up in hopes of finding someone who will take them to the Alpha Quadrant. Gwen encounters a Klingon and attempts to negotiate with that Klingon, but it does not go as she had hoped. But then one of Janeway's officers, the Trill officer, whose name is escaping me right now, intervenes, and the officer who has been working very closely with rehabbing Gwen's father realizes that, in fact, she is Gwen. And because the Nautilus is working with her father, Gwen runs for it to warn her friends. Meanwhile, Jankum just runs into the Tellarite doctor of the Dauntless and discovers that he might be lower on the pecking order of Tellarite society than he thought, which is unfortunate for poor Jankum. And of course, Dahl bumps into Admiral Janeway, which of course is shock to him because the hologram Janeway has become one of his best friends, and to finally meet the real Janeway is, well, it's like the time I met Leonard Nimoy. It's a little bit breathtaking, and I don't know what to say. So, Janeway tries to kind of coax him into saying what's on his mind, but then when Gwen shows up and warns him that Starfleet is working with her father, they make a break for it. The officer that Janeway had come to find from the listening station tells them that the kids are, in fact, the ones who destroyed the station. So, of course, they give chase. Our intrepid crew find themselves a land speeder to which they try to race back to the protostar, and Okano is aboard because apparently he was going to do the same thing as try to escape because he's in trouble with the Xindi. Well, our crew does manage, with a little bit of jury rigging, manages to outrun Janeway and the Dauntless crew and the Xindi security officers that are on the planet. They get back to the protostar and they take off. Janeway, the real Janeway that is, beams back to the Dauntless with her crew, and they give chase. So, unfortunately, though, because the Protostar crew cannot call the Dauntless and warn them, because if they do, it might send the weapon to the Dauntless and it might override its systems. So they have to stay radio silent and try to evade it. But unfortunately, when Murph hatches from its egg, it accidentally launches a torpedo at the Dauntless. Janeway, assuming that they're hostile, opens fire and damages the Protostar's third nacelle, despite the fact that Gwen's father is urging Janeway to please stand down because he worries that his daughter will be harmed. Again, we do not know if he is faking it or he just wants to save the Protostar so it can launch the weapon into Starfleet. So the Protostar gets knocked out of warp drive into the beta quadrant, and they discover a little thing called the neutral zone. So Dahl makes the decision they're going to run for the neutral zone. They're going to hide there until they can fix the third nacelle and escape. Janeway, realizing what they're doing, begins to head towards the neutral zone, but her crew stops her because if the Dauntless invades the neutral zone, it will be seen as an act of aggression by the Federation. And just as they say it, 3 Romulan warbirds decloak and want to know Dauntless's intentions. And that is where our episode ends this week. So, moving on to the good, the bad, and the Gorn. Well, okay, so some things I really liked about this episode. First of all, I obviously liked the return of Captain Okano, a very beloved roguish character from the second season of Next Generation. Like I said, for whatever reason, they never got him to return for a follow-up episode, which is really too bad because a lot of fans really liked him a lot. For those of you who are not completely familiar with the character, he was kind of a Han Solo-esque type of character, smuggler, romantic hero, incredible flirt with the ladies. So, very roguish kind of lovable character. So it was nice to see him again, and it was nice to have Billy Campbell come back to play the character once more. I like the fact that they were very true to the real Janeway's character. For those of you who watched all 7 seasons of Voyager, you know that Janeway will not stop when her crew, her friends, her extended family are on the line. And she has been looking for Chakotay. She wants to know what happened to him. And she's not going to stop at anything. And neutral zone be damned. She's not going to let that, get in her way, because she wants answers. And Dahl and the crew seem to be the only people that have those answers. Unfortunately, I think if they ever get caught up, it's going to turn out the only person who's got the answers are Gwen's father. And that's going to be something, though, we'll have to worry about in our predictions. Another thing I liked, this was just kind of personal. I made the realization, and I should have noticed this sooner. Real Janeway's first officer, whose name is escaping me again at this moment, is not just Andorian, but he's Andorian Vulcan. I find this interesting because several years ago, I had a friend who liked cosplay as a Vulcan Andorian, and a lot of people used to tell, well, that's not possible. Well, if my friend is watching, or he watched this episode, I'm sure he's laughing now, because yes, it is now canon. There is at least one Andorian Vulcan Starfleet officer. So congratulations, Robin, if you happen to be watching us. Another thing I really liked, I'm really glad that the Xindi have made a comeback. I really like the characters. For those of you who are not familiar, they appeared in seasons 3 and 4 of Star Trek Enterprise, and they were kind of the first multiracial culture that Starfleet had encountered. Basically, they were kind of a precursor to what would become the Federation, because you had different types of Xindi that were reptilian, fish-like, avian. Go watch the episodes, or look them up. You'll get it all. I'm not doing it justice here, but they were rather interesting characters, so I'm glad to see them make a return. And moving a little bit towards the bad, there's just one little thing, and I'm kind of nitpicking here. It's a small thing. I'm trying to get a kind of an idea of the time frame of both Prodigy, Lower Decks, and Picard, because they're all supposed to take place somewhere pretty close to each other at this point. So obviously, if there's still a neutral zone, I think we can conclude that Romulus has not been destroyed as of yet, but it might be on the verge of being destroyed. We do know that from Lower Decks, Picard is already the admiral, and of course, Picard obviously takes place 13 years after the destruction of Romulus. So, trying to narrow down, I guess we can conclude that both Lower Decks and Prodigy are taking someplace in the 2390s, roughly. Although apparently, we do know that Janeway was an admiral as of Star Trek Nemesis. So, if someone could please narrow this down, or if all the writers could just sit down in a room and kind of narrow down what year everything is sort of taking, I could just, that would make me happy. I know I'm nitpicking here. It's not a big deal, but I'd just like to know for sure. Okay. That's really the only bad thing I had. Moving into the Gorn, and I'm going to pose a question. It's been on my mind the past few weeks. Do we all think that the future of Star Trek could be in animation? I mean, you're looking at Prodigy, which just recently won an award for Best Children's Animated Show, and it is terrific. Some of the storylines are somewhat sophisticated. I don't want to say adult, but they are, sophisticated ideas compared to other, shows you might have out there. And the animation is really wonderful. And then, like that Lower Decks, it has some really gripping stories. It's gotten a huge fan base over the last, couple of years very quickly. I mean, yeah, it pokes fun at a lot of the stuff in Star Trek, but it is in Star Trek continuity. It is the kind of humor that I like, and it tells, Star Trek stories that are very reminiscent of the 1990s, the Rick Berman TNG era Star Trek that many of us love. So, there's that. But then, going back to the early 1970s when you had the first Star Trek animated series, which was based off of the original series and had the voice talents of Bill Shatner, DeForest Kelley, Leonard Nimoy, Nichelle Nichols, Jimmy Doohan, and George Takei, and actually had several of the writers from Star Trek, who had written the original series, like Gene L. Coon and DC Fontana, were still writing episodes. And many of those episodes were every bit as good as anything they had on the live action show and would have been really brilliant, even though some people disagree whether or not that show was continuity. I personally think it is, and I think that it is part of Star Trek lore, and actually is the final 2 years of Kirk's 5-year mission. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Anybody who wants to shout out here on our YouTube channel or reach out to me on Facebook, you can let me know your thoughts on that. I'd love to hear them. But going back to my original question, do we think that the future of Star Trek could be animated? Well, why not? I mean, it's certainly less time consuming for actors to come in and read, a full season in about 10 days. Um, you're limited only by the animator and artist's imagination about what everything's going to look like. You definitely have a little bit lower overhead. That's not to say that, somehow animation is less than live action. It really isn't. Anybody here who is a fan of manga and anime knows this. And, I think we could tell every bit as sophisticated a story as we could on Discovery or Picard, and we could tell it on something like Lower Decks or Prodigy. I'm not saying I want to do away with live action. I just want to say, is it possible that the future of Trek could be an animation? So again, we'd love to hear your comments and thoughts on this or anything else about this episode you might have seen or noticed, or on anything on Star Trek Prodigy. As I said, this is a spotlight on the show and what we love about it. So, moving into predictions. Well, okay. So I predict that they will find a way to communicate to Janeway that they are not the enemy, but they have to keep Protostar away from the Federation. It's hard to say how they're going to do that. Maybe they'll just leave a note on a planet somewhere. Don't know. But I do know right now Janeway is not in the mood to listen to anybody. She is in the mood to hunt down whoever destroyed that listening outpost and rescue Chakotay. So, it's going to be interesting to see how we're going to get around that. I do predict Gwen's father will recover his memories and they will discover that he is, in fact, the big bad of the whole series. But I am hopeful that our crew will make it to the Alpha Quadrant eventually and will find their way into Starfleet Academy, where they will, eventually grow and become brilliant Starfleet officers. Especially Rock, who I think is becoming a really great scientist and really is the heart of the show. But I think Dal is really, really maturing and becoming a really great captain. But they're all really growing and they're really discovering themselves. And it's really exciting to watch this series. So, that is what I kind of have on tap right now. Sorry for the shorter episode, but I guess you've noticed I still have not got a standing co-host. But I hope that maybe after the Thanksgiving weekend holiday, I will be able to entice a few old friends to come pay us a visit and sit in with us for an episode or two while we talk more about Star Trek Prodigy and what we love about it. But again, I would love to hear from all of you, either here in our comments section or on our Facebook channel or YouTube channel or anything. So if you like what we're doing here, please like and subscribe to the Movers and Shakers Unlimited series of shows, particularly this one. We love to have more subscribers, and if we can get enough subscribers, we'll pick one of you to maybe be a special guest host on a future episode of this or one of our other Star Trek review shows. Until then, um, you can reach me at Josh Pritchett Jr. on Facebook. Sorry, let's not worry about doing Twitter right now because I really can't verify that that's me or not. Oh, wait, we have a comment. Oh, and it's my usual partner in crime, Mr. Chris Pabone. And he asks, whatever happening to that dashing, daring, debonair, devilish co-host you had? Did he move on to better things? Happy Thanksgiving. Okay, well, Chris, I don't know. We're going to have to find where that guy went. So we miss him terribly, and we hope he will be back with us very soon. Thank you for dropping a note in there, Chris. And again, anybody else can do that. So once again, you could reach me at Josh Pritchett Jr. on Facebook. Also, I am still the head of the Star Trek Northern Virginia Star Trek Meetup group on meetup.org. If you are interested in meeting more like-minded Star Trek fans who just like to get together in a real low-key situation, talk about Trek, occasionally watch some Star Trek, or just who like to go watch movies together and, just have fun, please do feel free to join us. We're a very open group. And also, my book, Bigfoot and Other Tales of the Supernatural, is still available on Amazon and Kindle. So, once again, on behalf of Movers and Shakers Unlimited and Prodigal Trek, this is Josh Pritchett signing off, wishing you all live long and prosper, and kapla! Have a great week and a happy Thanksgiving, everybody. Bye-bye.